जगदाश्रयं भवान् जगत्तायतुं भवान् जगदामादिभूतनायतुं भवानल्लो സർവഭൂതങ്ങളിലുമസക്തനല്ലോ ഭവാൻ നിർവികാരാത്മാ സാക്ഷിഭൂതനായതും ഭവാൻ അജനവ്യയൻ ഭവാനജിതൻ നിരഞ്ജനൻ വചസാം വിഷയമല്ലാതൊരാനന്ദമല്ലോ വാച്യവാചകോ ഭയഭേദേന ജഗന്മയൻ വാച്യനായി വരേണമേ വാക്കിനു സദാ മമ.
So you saw a glimpse of this new work that Methil Devika will be performing for Sampradaya Dance Creations Anvesana Reflections in Solitude, a digital festival that starts on May the 8th and 9th. And Methil Devika will be performing this on Sunday, May the 9th. We're delighted to be in conversation with her as she is in her home in Trivandrum, in Kerala, actually known as Thiruvananthapuram in God's country. Kerala is one of the most beautiful states in India, known for its lush green, palm swaying sands, and just one of the most delightful. And I actually grew up there myself and started my dance training in Kochi. So welcome, Devika, and what an intriguing start that we witnessed to your new work.
Thank you so much, and namaste.
So, I have so many questions. I've just been so fascinated by you as an artist, by your new work. But firstly, let me ask you, what has been your experience going through the pandemic? And has it stifled your creativity? Or in fact, has it actually energized you as a creative person?
It hasn't stifled my creativity, and it has neither energized me as a creative person. Basically, that probably is the question. Why? Because I think maybe generally me as a person is not one to be, in public spaces most of the day. I like to be inside my house, so even otherwise. so it hasn't made much of a difference to my creativity. Of course, performances have really come down, and it's very tough as an artist to sustain right now. So professionally, I mean. So when I was going through through these months of pandemic, the question probed. I read an article from, I think it was a university in Canada. I think Calgary, or it's a university in Canada, which spoke about how women went through stress much more than men, and how the pandemic actually affected women more than men, and they went through anxiety. And so that made me think about women in villages in India who probably are always in isolation, and they're always in the kitchens, and they hardly get to really go to public spaces, right? There's a lot of women who are empowered, but there's also a lot of women still. Uh, for them, I think the new normal is the old normal. So it doesn't make much of a difference. And there was the influx of thoughts where then I thought of women who probably have gone through isolation. And one such person was the Surbahar player, Annapurna Devi. And I thought of her, who was Pandit Ravi Shankarji's first wife. And then I thought about Ahalya, and I've never thought of her before, honestly. She's never occurred to me before. I've never even thought much into the story or what it was and all that. And then I thought, okay, what does the stone image, which is the most popular version of Ahalya, at least in Kerala, from the Adhyatma Ramayana. And me being a person who actually associates a lot of
So very quickly before Devika gets her internet signal back, Ahalya is a very central figure in the Ramayana, and as she said, she has been frozen into a stone by a curse um, of her sage husband Gautama, and it's very interesting that this uh, it talks about patriarchy in a way in those times where Ahalya, it's an interesting fact that she was seduced. Go ahead, Devika. I was just talking about Ahalya while you're
yeah, I actually missed the first part of your question because there was a Wi-Fi issue. I just logged into
right.
the
No, I was
I
talking
just heard
about
the
how
latter part.
Ahalya is a central figure in the Ramayana and how intriguing it is that patriarchy plays such a big part of her life where she was seduced by a man, cursed by a man, and redeemed by a man,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how that strong theme of patriarchy plays out in her life.
that's right. And uh, that's how we are narrated. In fact, what I perhaps did was I wrote down the realistic version of Ahalya and what should have really happened. And and when I wrote down the versions that I read of Ahalya had nothing to do with my realistic reading into what could have happened, because obviously when you talk of mythology, there is also a little bit of reality into it. So then, when I read Ramayana and the Ramayana from the other Ramayanas after the Adhyatma Ramayana, everything was so. Um, the whole aspect of the male gender being dominant and she being cursed was very dominant. And but then I again felt that there is something else into it, and perhaps it's the reading of the original Ramayana that could have been distorted. What did Adi Kavi say? Basically, was Valmiki patriarchal too? So Irithachan surely seemed patriarchal, and I wouldn't say patriarchal, but then I felt that there was a lot of difference in the way he had perhaps read Valmiki. But when I went back to the Adi Kavi, I realized that he treated Ahalya with a lot more sensitivity, and that was for us to actually read, because he didn't write many lines on her, but he just wrote a couple of them, and the rest was up to the reader to fill the gaps in between. And when the male interprets it, it's perhaps from his socio-cultural context, and I'm sure Eritachan interpreted interpreted it from the socio-cultural context that he was in then. But as a woman, I probably gave it a very different perspective. And I wouldn't say I changed the content or I altered the content, but then I thought it was most realistic. Um, but here, I think I wanted to stay true to the story that Valmiki really wrote, and I didn't want to bring in any elements of feminism or because I didn't see that in Valmiki's Ramayana much. Of course, there is in certain parts, but then I wanted to be true to what he probably um, the significance of self-realization and the significance of self-love, which is most important, to be self-reliant. And therefore, I placed Ahalya um, as a person who went through went through all that and finally went through this process of self-realization, where she understood that both, I mean, Indra and Rama are certainly two states of her own being, and Rama being not just a mere god who gave her moksha, but the fact that she had to get the Ramatvam, or the aspect of self-love. So Indra being a very crucial entity for that to happen. But the other readings, if you look at the postmodern writers or the modern writers, you find that Ahalya is in a more, she's more feminist. She's more questioning. But I somehow didn't want that because, uh, uh, as for some reason, I there was a lot of bhakti in me at that point of time, where I thought even to question, I think the end of all questioning, you have to seek the answers within. Even if you question society, society is not going to give you all the answers. Perhaps the answers are that come from within.
How beautifully put, because I think what you have really illustrated for all of us and for all the listeners is that the power of mythology and the power of myth is that it is completely open to interpretation, and it is not dogmatic. It is up to the reader, it is up to the searcher to reimagine mythology and all these figures. And I'm really fascinated to hear that you have used it as part of your own inner search, and you've not really relied on postmodern writing. You're not taking up the cause for feminists, and you've used your own voice in this work. And truly that is important, because I think we are all questioning the place of mythology in our lives. And every day we come upon the relevance of mythology, and it is our own search. And I'm truly happy that you brought that up, because all of us who were raised with grandmother's stories of the great myths of Ramayana and Mahabharata are constantly searching for answers as to why things happen the way they did. But they have a message. They have a message for all of us, even today. And as dance teachers here now in the West, we need to know that and to be able to explain to our students, our dancers, when we are and giving them the freedom to be able to interpret it in their own ways, especially when they're older dancers.
Yes.
And so I don't want you to give away too much more about Ahalya, because it's going to be an absolutely powerful, I think, a powerful piece. But did you write the lyrics for it?
No, no. The lyrics was Valmiki Ramayanas, but in between, where I introduced characters and certain things, I had to bring in my own lyrics, and I
Mhm.
did the music because we actually from January to March is when I was planning the execution of this work, and January I was infected with COVID, And so the execution bit was very, very tough. So I couldn't rely on any other musicians, and I did the music myself. And it is the first time that I'm doing music for 30 minutes for something like
Right.
this. And me not being a trained singer or anything. And I've also sung in the last bit. So, um, so for me, it was quite an ordeal because I was very tired and I had to. We had. I had so much of what we say within such stipulated date. I needed to finish a lot of different phases of the work. And the initial bit, I would sing, I would send it to my vocalist, and then I would sing. I could barely sing for 1 minute together because I had throat issues and breathing issues. And a lot of the mnemonics or the swarajatis that you hear is what I did in my sleep, and I would just wake up and record and go back to sleep, and the next morning it would seem so perfect. And if you look at, and for me, it was a great experience working with music because, see, the story had different emotions, it had different faces, and it had different turning points. And I didn't want to use too many ragas because I'm not a very, I don't like multiple ragas unnecessarily. And working on the tunes for me was very revealing because sometimes a raga like Shuddha Danyasi, the fact that it was able to accommodate multiple emotions. It could accommodate romance, it could accommodate sorrow, it could accommodate anger, restraint, withdrawal, and that the potential of that raga and the potential of raga Bhupalam. And there's a slight difference between Bhupalam and Shubha Pandurali. If you enter Shubha Pandurali, it may seem sorrowful, but Bhupalam being the morning raga, I had to use it to awaken up Ahalya's senses with the onset of Indra. So,
Yes.
so these things, I feel a lot of what was in my mind. It's probably 10% of what is happening in my mind that you see, or what, because it's really a compromised version of what I had within. And all work of mine is a compromised version of what I
Yes.
have in mind. For every
I,
artist, for that matter.
I wouldn't say it's a compromise. It's all, everything we create is a work in progress, you know. We
Exactly.
finish it and then we say, no, when we get time, we're going to continue working on it. And
I mean,
it,
the best
yeah,
part is only we know what the real or the original
of
visual is.
course, of
So
course.
that's the best part. So
Of course. But tell me, during the pandemic, I mean, you're limited by having to work with people at close quarters. So everything is sort of off-site, working with your musicians. Tell me about the process of collaboration, and who were your collaborators, your main
Actually,
collaborators?
my vocalist is a new entrant into the field of dance, and his name is Payanur Mahendran. I chose him because I needed to actually sit with the musicians quite a bit, and this really needed a lot of. It was not like you give the song and then they come a couple of days earlier and rehearse and go. I throughout the work in progress, I needed to sit with him and he needed to sit with me. Then my other musicians were all from Trivandrum. I used the Mirava for it's an instrument that's not used in Mohiniyattam, but I used that for the first time to showcase Indra. And then, of course, needless to say, is when it came to I didn't want to do it outdoors because I knew that this was segregated into different acts, and these acts had to be really focused, and we didn't want the outdoors to intervene with the acts because anything behind the dancer would be a suggestive motive of a part of her work. So I didn't want any outside scenery or anything. So I decided to make it as a proper theater, and then for that I needed to choose a proper camera person, and the lighting was so crucial, and I didn't want the lighting to be extremely on the face. I needed subtle lighting, and then I thought of the legendary filmmaker and cinematographer Madhu Ambat, who's videographed, who's been the cinematographer for Anjali, then for Amaram, for Vaishali, a lot of those really epic movies of Malayalam, and a lot in the north also. And he's a national award winner, and with so much of experience. I think he's also archived and documented a lot of Kalakshetra's dance production. So he really knew what I was, the process. And he flew down from Chennai thrice, and such a senior person. And for me, it was um, really enlightening because every bit of it was timed and the lighting was schemed accordingly. Um, and the fact that otherwise you would find a lot of a gash of blue light or green light. No, the transitions are very subtle, and for me that worked really well. And he completely understood the importance of the epic, um, and then there was this. I did post production work was also quite tough because we had editing done by a wonderful editor called Albi Natraj, and we did the coloring uh, by a person, the colorist called Liju Prabhakar, who was a colorist for. His recent work is a very famous film called Drishyam in Malayalam. So I think I had a lot of good names who were willing to work, and I had a lot of people who, in the sense that the team was really big with a huge set of, people behind the camera and the lights. And for me, something like Mohiniyattam, which is so minimalistic and which does not have so much of paraphernalia, and it's not really very vibrant physically, but the fact that so much of detailing had come into was caught on camera is something really delightful. I mean, I perhaps when you dance on stage, perhaps the impact would be different, but capturing it on screen is different story altogether because the camera people are also not used to, especially the new generation boys. They're not used to seeing Indian classical dance like this. They're probably used, especially in Kerala, they're used to seeing more of shows and starlit stages, but something as subtle as Ahalya, which has a text and a parallel text happening, was a relatively new experience for all of them.
This sounds like a work of art in itself, Devika. I mean, the immense amount of care and thought and collaboration and working with such stalwarts in the industry. It promises to be such an exciting experience for all our viewers. So I hope every one of you is going to be tuned in for the festival and sharing this particular conversation because it promises to be a really unique experience. And Devika, I mean, I've been fascinated by your work ever since I saw Sarpatattva. And, uh, and I couldn't believe that you had created it, choreographed it in half an hour. Now, that is particularly revealing because
Which one? Which one?
Sarpatattvam, I heard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. The dance choreography. Yeah,
yeah, it was a truly again the cinematography for that one was very. This is a work I'm talking about that's on YouTube, so please look for it because here again is a masterful, uh, I would say, a documentary of your work. Um, Very beautiful. Tell us about it because it really is a fascinating subject about the chakras and the
yeah.
kundalini and yeah,
That's
tell
right.
us about it.
I think Sarpatattvam is more of a layman's masterpiece because I could build into that as much as I wanted, but because I was trying to put it on online, I wanted it to be as simple as possible, but at the same time have the gist of what I really wanted to portray. And the camera was done by a person called Vipin Chandran, and the director who assisted me was Rajesh Kadamba. Now they have a lot of, they love fiction and they wanted to build in that aspect of fiction into Sarpatattvam. So you see that in the beginning. And Sarpatattvam definitely was a different, had a different approach altogether, and was a different experience. I think that was more that was a very intuitive work. It was very intuitive. It came out of the blue, and I didn't have anything to fall back on. I had no research material back then, and if I did have, it was only after I had done the entire work. And I had to just rely on, perhaps the priests in the temples, just to ensure if I'm not doing something wrong. Because if it's ritualistic and esoteric, then I had to ensure that I was getting it right. See, however progressive I may be, I really wanted to stick to the ritualistic aspect of it, because as dancers, it's so important that we have this. I mean, we believe in the psychophysical, and for this psychophysical to happen, if you believe in something, you might as well just go ahead trusting that. So, and I believed in the power of the serpent as being very basic to the feminine, to the
Mm.
divine feminine, and therefore that happened. And that was that didn't take much time, because all that I had worked on, I already had the visuals in my mind, and I had created the music. And the moment the music was on, and it was just in one go that I had, especially the floor movements didn't take me. It took me just as much time as I as it took to actually execute it, because it was just in one go. And I think I had it all in my mind, neatly crafted, and there was something that told me that is it. This is enough, and don't do more. Whereas the rest of the work, I would revise and then rewrite. The most difficult part of creativity is putting a full stop, and that full stop is very tough. And with Sarpatattvam, there was something telling me, this is enough, and and that's how it came about. And even the whole aspect of, again, chakras, I couldn't explain much, because if you venture too much into philosophy, perhaps the common people will not be able to understand. So I wanted it to be brief. Wanted it to be relatable by people who would understand the concept, and I wanted it to be aesthetic for people who just like art for art's sake. So
Well, quite a deep subject. I think I'm glad you explained it, because I will certainly go back to watch it again with this fresh input that you've given us. I would love to know more about your ongoing research in Mohiniyattam, um, and what are the new directions you wish to explore.
actually, there are many. There are many, because I think I would like to explore this. I'm fascinated by narratives and narratology, uh, how you narrate a subject. Ahalya was fairly linear, but given a choice and given, if I really had the physical health, I would have probably changed the probably the narrative, and or the narratology. And that is something I would like to work in all our subjects, because Mohiniyattam as such is, there's still a lot of potential to improve, and it's such a potent art form which is totally underestimated, or it's sidelined, I feel, vis-a-vis the other art forms, because the aesthetics are very sensitive, and the aesthetics are very high, and it's not very easy to bring out a work in Mohiniyattam which really appeals immediately. You can't start off with very vibrant movements. It starts off at a pace. So um, I would love to explore more in the art form and bring in more subjects. And my next work is on the metrics, on the divine metrics, which is the Sri Chakra. That would be another documentation. And and I would also like to. There are subjects which you can probably, which which would be more effective on stage, but there are others that are more effective on screen with another media coming along. Therefore, you can bring in a lot of interpretations and a lot more layers to your work when you have other media coming in. So that's one thing. And I would also like to bring in some, get into some virtual projects, and even where training is concerned, I would like to bring about some new technology in training online, because this is so difficult. Some things, a few things exciting. And as per my research, a lot of subjects actually. One is my first research was actually based on how you not how the gestures are made, how the semiotics come about in an art form, especially based in Kerala, and how do you really explain these gestures, not the meaning of them, but exactly how did it come about, so that assimilation and understanding it and delivering it to a lay audience becomes much easier. That is one. And the second thing is also about my own. I would like to write two books, one on research methodology and one on narrative techniques. That's another project. And I'm also working with the differently abled uh, on a very different genre. I think I would give more details about that maybe in future. So.
You have a very full life, Devika, my goodness. And
No, that's all I do, G. I only know to dance. I don't know anything else. So,
well, I mean, I can imagine the utmost uh, fulfillment that you must get from all the things that you do. And then there is another aspect of your life, which is your teaching, because you have two institutes, one in Palakkad and also in Trivandrum. So so do you actually go back and forth between the two of them? And
sometimes, yes.
tell us about your two teaching institutions and
Actually, I don't think I fall into the regular genre of teachers. I just have very few students, maybe all together between Palakkad and Trivandrum. I may have 15, 1 5. So,
okay.
right. But then I do have, I work in Sanskrit University as an adjunct professor, and I have my students there. And I have a couple of international students who study online. So teaching, I feel today our students didn't be people that we train directly. There are a lot more people who follow us actually online, and they really grasp you much more than your own students. And that's the benefit of today's I think all today's social media. And teaching, of course, I'm teaching offline and I'm teaching online too, but I'm not relying much on that. I would be documenting most of my work, and that is what I want to do, because I would want it to be available to everybody, irrespective of whether they are my students or somebody else's student. Because I realize that we as dancers have such short time, um, and with every theme that you work, you may probably outgrow it after some time. So it's so important to document it when you're still passionate about it, you're physically passionate about it.
Yes.
And yeah, so documentation is something I'm going to be very serious about. I
Right.
think at least my 40 pieces, 40 to 50 pieces, I would have to document at least roughly.
Of course, of course. Documentation is an archival of your works, and your research is so important. I think when one is busy in their career, they don't pay much attention to it, but it is so very important. And through teaching, I think the methodology and the pedagogy also is explored, and it is
Yeah.
well all your international students, and particularly Harikishan Nair, who is right here in Toronto, is
Yeah.
cannot stop talking about you. So
Oh,
uh,
okay.
yes, so thank you. And I think perhaps we are. Do you have anything else to share, Devika?
I probably don't remember, but I'm so glad that the uh, I'm so glad that you were very timely in coming and giving me an opportunity to commission the work, and that's why this happened with such swiftness. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have slept over it for many more months, and probably it would never have materialized because most of our work, I think we as dancers and creators, perhaps we only do 10% of what actually uh, the kind of ideas that we have. Perhaps only 10 to 20% are still being executed because there's so many variables in being a performing artist. And the moment when, see, to imagine is easy, to create in the mind is easier, but the moment it comes to the physical space, then you are reliant on so many people, so many factors, and therefore the possibility of doing everything is so reduced. So, and therefore, I'm so glad that
Well, we are truly glad here at Sampradaya Dance Creations that all these incredibly amazing artists have accepted our invitation for these new commissions and have come up with such incredibly unique works that they put their heart and soul, that too during a very difficult period of the pandemic. And that's why we called it Anvesana, Reflections in Solitude. So certainly tune in the next 2 Saturdays to listen to Rama Vaidyanathan the next Saturday, and then the last weekend of conversations with Aditi Mangaldas the following Saturday. And I think we will be ready to start taking questions that we will now start seeing in a bar uh, that our team will start posting. And hopefully, Devika's connectivity will be restored quickly, and then we will have answers for you for those questions. Sorry, we lost you for a while, Devika.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry about the connection. Yeah.
Well, we are
Okay.
very happy to have, we're very pleased that you actually accepted immediately our invitation, and as all the others did. And so we have four stalwarts in classical dance of India, and
I mean, no, they're all really. For me, it's more of an honor for me because the three of the other performers that you have are really very very. I think they really mark um, their names in the profession and they're very senior. And I'm so glad that you made me a part of them. So
we are very happy to have you. And I think we will start having questions uh, that will appear in a bar just below. So they will be directed to you. So please do go ahead and answer them. And yeah,
what is your advice to choreographers who may want to explore works steeped in mythology but want to bring about a contemporary adaptation of the same? What are the risks involved? I think anything is okay. See, I would say it's your conviction more than the risk. If and whatever we do is always backed by our experience and our knowledge, which is again backed by a lot of things that's been handed over to us by our gurus and society and certain formulae that's been ingrained in our mind, and we make that the basis of further readings. So I would say perhaps you can build a subject based on your basic knowledge, which I always say is again not without flaws. Knowledge itself may not be without flaws because it's what is handed down to you. But again, one can have a reverse process too, where you work backwards and actually uh, question the very foundation of the very fabric of what of knowledge that you've built, and from that you would get a lot of other things. So scriptures needn't be completely, I would say, scriptures needn't be completely right. You can always question scriptures. Similarly, society needn't be right, or even your readings can be entirely prejudiced. But I think a work of art for me, more than tweaking the content or more than tweaking the themes, for me, the craft is very important. For me personally, it is not Ahalya or the character that excited me. It is the fact that it is the craft of Mohiniyattam that excites me, and how I can use my craft or form to bring it to weave in a subject like this. So essentially, in art, it's how you deliver more than what you deliver. And what are the risks involved? I think first of all, it's the risks that are essentially involved is the fact that you probably are not convinced yourself. You're scared of what others say, and and all these risks are just emotional risks, and it's not really great. I mean, you just need to be. You just do it with a lot of conviction and do it properly with the right craft, and it will be okay. As a Mohiniyattam practitioner, are you influenced by the other dance styles you have learned within your Mohiniyattam work? Of course, because Mohiniyattam itself is, forget me seeing the other dance styles, any art form, any art form is influenced by the art forms that are there around it, or by the maker of the art form himself or herself is influenced by what he sees. So definitely, yes, I am influenced by other dance styles, although I don't try to bring them into it. I don't. So anything else?
So let me ask you a question. What is the general trend of Mohiniyattam? Are there still, is it primarily now a solo art form in India now in the current context, or is it going into larger ensemble work?
It is going into larger ensemble work, but not many. And I wouldn't say the ensemble work uh, are really great, but you have a few dancers who know the craft, and I think they are dancers who are used to seeing more of such work, and therefore it's easier to do. But it's more of a solo art form, and even as solo dancers, I don't think we have many solo dancers also from
Hmm.
Mohiniyattam. Um, like I said before, this is a very tricky art form, and it has a lot to do with. Uh, People talk about its history, people talk about its technique, everything is there, but how is this delivered the best? Especially when you have other vibrant dance forms and so many things happening in the other dance styles. To me, this art form is very different. The attitude one takes to do this art form is very different from the attitude I would take to do another art form. Um, for me, it's very equivalent uh, to real meditation, even physically, and even when I stand as a Mohiniyattam dancer, for some reason I feel very different. I feel very different. Yeah.
And why would that be? Is it, you said that earlier, but do you feel not much attention is given to Mohiniyattam?
There's a lot of tension in Mohiniyattam because forget the attention. All these years, there has been a lot of problems situating the art form as such, as to whether it is this or whether it is this sampradaya. Or see, we don't have, unlike the other art forms, at least up to the last century, we don't have a lineage that we have seen previously, maybe pre 1930s, we haven't seen the lineage. What we see is only post 1950s, what we see of the art form. The others are all assumptions and imagination, and so positioning the art form is quite difficult. Now, once you position the art form, then you need to see how you would really like to take it, because we were told as students that it is Lasya based, it's Sringaram based. Of course, it is these two. But again, how much can you bring into the gamu, even the gamu of Lasya and Sringara? How much content is permissible inside, and how much can you expand Lasya and Sringara? So that is a very different take. And even if you do, what is the approach to the how do you really deliver the craft? And it's very tricky. It's a tricky art form, because for me, suppose I do a choreography in Kuchipudi, I can do it faster than I would do it in Mohiniyattam. And we have the pace of the art form itself, which gives you a lot of scope for building a parallel text within the narrative. So when you act, you also create simultaneously an acting manual. So if you see in Ahalya, the text that I have written in subtitle is Valmiki Ramayanam. But the ones that I act is my parallel text. It's not written by Ramayana, but by Valmiki, but it is written by me as a poet in my body. So, how many, and even the teachers of Kerala Kalamandalam, if you see, they were so involved in establishing this art form. They were so involved in giving it, neatness and polish and technique. And there are a couple of dancers who emerged later, that gave it self-expression and took it beyond technique. But again, these days, it's very difficult to see young dancers. One is the technique itself. Execute the technique brilliantly, I think, really requires a great guru. And beyond that, to bring in fresh themes that really appeal to even the common man. So how many Swadhitirnar Padams or Varnams can, it's really beautiful when you do a Swadhitirnar Varnam. But what about the common person? I mean, you don't need to please the common man always, but I'm saying, still, if you have a repertoire, what are the variations that you can bring into 8 pieces or 7 to 8 pieces is quite tough.
So, what about social justice themes? Do you think that is something that one can explore if one has the absolute control and mastery over the technique and has an intelligent mind and
I think,
and the control over the aesthetics and the process of exploration and creativity. What do you feel about that?
of course, I think anything can be brought into the art form. As I said, it's really not the theme or the content. It's how you do it. Um, I personally even did the Corona, an instruction video on Corona uh, during the early months of the pandemic.
I saw
And
that.
yeah,
Very, very unique and interesting.
that was very unique. And I took the best part is you wouldn't find the term Corona anywhere.
Right.
It's Swami Dikshita's eternal Navavarana Kriti. And it is really possible to bring in themes of social justice. Except that what I see is most of the dancers usually rely on stories that are already written by writers, or take something from there and then bring in. But I guess one should also start writing on their own. I feel giving their own perspective of a subject. You don't need to take a writer's perspective unless you identify with the writer, yes. But I think as a dancer, after a certain age, you can give your own perspective, and for that, you need to write and perhaps get it rewritten poetically by somebody and then do it. It is possible, definitely possible. But for that, technique is important, aesthetics is important. And any small subject, even for children or little children, you want to talk about the jungle, it's so possible to do it in a few minutes and get their attention. Because this whole possibility of extending time. So the time in an art form is very different from the time that is there in a content when you read. When you expand the time, you get in more details and it becomes clearer. To give again to place Ahalya, uh, the time period that if you try expanding the moments, if you try expanding the morning or the meetings between Indra and Ahalya, you get a clearer picture. So this expansion of time is very important, even if the theme is really small. If you're able to do it, it is great. For Sarpatattvam, the very line Kanne Siriyada Kundaladu Pambe, the fact that the serpent only gets intuitions. It could have been just done through a few mudras, but the moment I expanded it, I was able to show the serpent uh, search for its prey and get into the vibrate. I mean, basically the human psyche and how one should actually look inwards is what I really intended, and that was a very crucial part of the performance. And that's because I extended that line and that moment. So anything is possible. I don't think we should. The difficulty is when you say too many things together in the art form. That way, the sense of enjoyment, the sense of aesthetics would go. Say a few things in the art form neatly and clearly, and build upon that, and that makes it very interesting for the audience.
Great. So I believe there's the next question.
How do you handle days when you may be low on creative motivation?
Happens to all of us.
I don't handle them. I just let it go. I just let it be. And rather than the great Indian myths, can Mohiniyattam communicate other great classics like Shakespeare or Khalil Gibran or modern philosophical works? Of course, it can. Of course, for that, I think it is very important that the dancer is well read, knows Shakespeare. Just like, see, we haven't been able to even understand the psyche of Valmiki or the psyche of Erutachan. We have one thing is about our art forms is we actually see the art forms differently from the makers of it, or even we see the writing differently. It's very separate from the writer. It's very important to know the behavior of the writer too. So if you take Shakespearean plays and then you understand if you want to really understand the plays, you have to understand from what perspective Shakespeare wrote it, from what perspective, and then you can give your own perspective and the delineation of it. Again, if you have to learn Khalil Gibran, you have to know what kind of work he writes, and it can't be suddenly one day you read Khalil Gibran and then you try and there is a process of mulling over, contemplating, sleeping over the piece, and this has to really breathe within you, and it has to build within you, and then a part of it is what you really extricate and you make into a beautiful piece. And of course, we can do Shakespearean plays like Kathakali does. Well, Kathakali uses a lot of Shakespearean themes. We can bring in Greek epics too, and that is one of my dreams to bring in a Greek epic. And like you said, make it into an ensemble production with me perhaps not dancing, but I would bring in a lot of dancers from different cultures and from different places in the globe and make it into a production. And I would love to do something like that. Thank you for the insightful questions. We now draw to the close of the question and answer session. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Devika. This has been a very engaging conversation with you, and I'm sure for many of our viewers, and it certainly sparked their interest in watching Ahalya and your presentation on May the 9th. And I'm sure people across the globe, because we've done our best to spread the word everywhere, will be watching. And yes, this has been this has been very special for us. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and share your art, your life, your thoughts, your research. Truly, truly fascinating. Thank you, Devika.
Thank you, Lata. Thank you all
Thank
for
you. Thank you. So lovely time. And yes, look forward to next Saturday and and the following Saturday. But please look at the flyer and get your tickets on Chalet for the festival. It it's going to be a treat for all dance lovers, art lovers.